conspiracy theories are dangerous.
Information is the oxygen of a democracy.
With Republicans, with progressives, with libertarians, because this is not about right and left, this is about right and wrong.
It's so sacred we can't talk about it.
Our security is at stake.
Oh my gosh, I love you guys. You guys are hilarious. Welcome back to the show. Welcome to the show. We're going to just check the comments here and make sure that we got sound this time, friends. Y'all are legends. Thanks for hanging out. We had the largest live stream without sound ever done in human history. What a show. What a show. So I just wanted to pop back in here real quick to say thanks for coming. Thanks for watching. I appreciate you watching the whole stream. We're going to sign off for the night now. I know that it was like a big and controversial show, but I'm glad you all tuned into the show. I just wanted to say thanks for coming and good night, and I'll see you the next time. No, I'm just playing. I'm just playing with you guys. We're going to give people a moment to come back in here, and now you've gotten some visual tease of what's going on, but you can't tell what's going on because you didn't hear shit. So that's pretty funny in my mind. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just kind of quickly speed run us back through everything, and we're just going to make this pop. So first, we're going to do a disclaimer. As everyone's coming in, it's important to state that tonight we're going to be talking about the Jews. We're going to be talking about Israel. We're going to be talking about Epstein. We're going to be talking about the CIA and the American government. We're going to be talking about all kinds of complex, controversial subjects. And inherently, when you talk about complex and controversial subjects like this, things get taken out of context, especially when you talk about Judaism, when you talk about Epstein and Israel. Everyone's going to, lose their shit. So let's be clear. When I'm talking about anything tonight, particularly about individuals and their actions, I'm referring to individuals and their actions. And I'm not saying that all Jews did a thing. I'm not saying that all Israel supporters do a thing. I'm not saying that every Zionist is a certain way, unless I specify that I am. I'm speaking about individuals. And in the same vein, when I'm speaking about the Mossad or the CIA or the FBI, what I'm speaking about is usually certain factions within those groups, splintered organizations that have walled themselves off on the other side of many degrees, usually, of classification and top secret clearances so that things can be compartmentalized. Because the way that covert intelligence agencies have always worked is to compartmentalize projects and information and scandals so that one side of the operation does not know what the other side is doing, so that when this side gets exposed, that side doesn't know. And so that if you come looking and you find a sex trafficking operation, it's extremely hard to tie it back to who it came from. And so in general, we're going to try to be relatively specific with our language, but in general, I am not generalizing. I'm speaking specifically about who I'm speaking about and about pieces of groups and certain elements within groups, not about entire groups all at once. There's our disclaimer. I'm sure it won't help. The other disclaimer that is important to repeat, that is obviously not going to help also, but this show, this discussion is intended to be taken in whole, not in small slices. And it's an extremely nuanced and complicated discussion, and it needs a full run through. It needs enough time to speak carefully and intentionally about all the little pieces. And so when people inevitably try to clip small segments out of this to paint it as something that it's not, all of you who have seen the whole recording will know that those people are fucking idiots. And this is me calling them out because they are engaging in propaganda. And at best, it's because they're ignorant and dumb and pushing an agenda. And at worst, it's because they're working for someone on behalf of an intelligence agency or on behalf of an agenda or on behalf of something that wants to muddy the conversation. And I think we can all imagine who might want to do such things and why they might want to do such things. But if you're not with it yet, by the end of the conversation, you probably will be. So there's our disclaimer. Now on to this question, the big question, the question that I fucking clickbaited you super hard with. I didn't clickbait you. I really do mean it. That we're going to talk about an extremely controversial question tonight that is still to this day quite taboo. And I think that my show is going to be fine. I think that I'm going to be fine. I don't think I'm going to I'm sure I'll piss some people off, but I'm not worried about, the end of the world. But as I pose this thought, a lot of people started speculating in the comments of what question are we talking about? Well, now Bob is curious what the question is. And I saved a couple of ideas, a couple of guesses. What if Epstein always worked for the U.S. and Israel is the canard? Plenty of circumstantial evidence that he's tied to Mossad, but what if? It would explain a lot. I don't think it would explain very much. And if you wanted to convince me that Epstein was loyal to America first and he was working for America on behalf of America, you'd have to present me with some damn good evidence to convince me of that, because the body of evidence is overwhelming for what was really going on. In fact, it's worth mentioning that this Epstein list idea, this idea that we need a release of documents to figure out who his clients were and what he was doing, that's bullshit. We already know. It's already been exposed over a decade of research by people like Whitney Webb writing One Nation Under Blackmail, which you can and should read probably a couple of times. People like Ryan Dawson, people like Alex Jones. There are countless people over the years that have talked about Epstein, that have researched Epstein, that have exposed his crimes and the list and all of the above. What we're actually looking for in these documents is maybe there is some new information. Maybe there's some tidbits that we didn't know in advance. And maybe it will confirm certain things that we already suspected. But we're also looking for what is left out of the documents. What are they censoring that we know is true already, but they are trying to obfuscate? There's a lot of things that we might get from this release of the list, but a list is probably not what it's going to be. It's going to be a bunch of documents, a bunch of videos, a bunch of stuff that some of it we don't even want them to release. Like the videos, we don't want those. Okay. Those should not go on the internet because they are literally adults raping children. And that's so fucked. We do probably want some confirmation that what they're telling us is on those files, but we sure as hell don't want to see them without a serious amount of censorship. So, is it the fact that Elon and Trump didn't fully keep their word and they themselves must have handlers from the foreign state that shall not be named? Because yes, we need it, but also please be careful. We'll talk about Trump and Elon, but that's not taboo. You're allowed to talk about Trump and Elon. No one's going to come for you if you talk about Trump and Elon. You mean Trump was his buddy? Yeah, but you're allowed to talk about that. I've talked about that a lot. That's not hard to talk about. And it'll come up. How Ghislaine Maxwell was convicted of sex trafficking minors to no one. That'll come up, but that is also not taboo. That is the entire discussion. Is the list is who did they sell these services to? So, the question, and this is where everybody that was in the original sound-free version got this funny little sneak peek of our panel without any context as to what exactly this panel was all about, which I find kind of hilarious. So let me bring up our panel. Oh, and let me fix our background real quick. So our panel is just a smattering of mostly media personalities, the kinds of people that we might hope and expect even to answer this question, both for themselves personally and for the public. This is by no means everyone that should answer this question, but this is a good smattering of people to get us thinking about what exactly is going on here. Okay? So let's start with a very simple version of the question. Ben Shapiro, our boy Ben. I'll pose this question directly to you, Ben. Let's get right up here with Ben. Ben, suppose you had a button, Ben, and that button, when you pressed it, it would cause China to have a catastrophe. Maybe they get invaded by their neighbors. Maybe they go through civil unrest and revolts. but it causes the government of China to collapse eventually. And it causes a certain amount of strife and struggle and sadness for China. And it's a tragedy for China. Right? But if you don't press that button, then that exact fate will befall America. And America will be invaded and taken over and ruled by an enemy, and bad things will happen to America in equal proportion. Would you press that button, Ben, to save your country, America, from strife and revolt and occupation and problems? Or would you choose to press the button to save your country, America, but instead, unfortunately, China has to deal with that fate? Would you press that button? I would posit that the definition of America first is that you would press that button. You have to make a choice. It's going to happen one way or the other way, Ben. You have to make a choice. And China or America, what are you going to pick? Charlie, same question to you. It's either Iran or America. If you don't press the button, serious strife is going to befall America. Americans will not be sovereign. They'll be taken over by a foreign nation. But if you do press the button, then Iran receives the same fate. But America is saved, and America will prosper instead. If you had to choose between Iran prospering and America suffering, or America prospering and Iran suffering, Charlie, would you push that button? I would hope, since you throw an event called AmFest, America Fest, and you profess to be America first, I would hope that that is a very simple answer. That you would put America's interests first over Iran. Jordan, Megan, same question to you. Suppose you had to make the choice. If you don't press it, then horrible things will happen to America. But if you do press it, you avert that catastrophe here, and instead it happens to another nation like Iran. Would you press it? I pose the exact same question to all of you on our panel, to all of our politicians, to everyone in the audience. Okay? Think through that question. For me, it's not hard. God damn it, StreamYard. Oh my gosh, I'll kill you, StreamYard. So, what we have to do to fix the thumbs up is switch our camera and switch it back. I don't know if that's an Apple thing or not. I won't put thumbs up anymore. It freezes my camera. So there's the question. There's a button, and if you don't press it, America suffers. And if you do press it, another country suffers and America prospers. That seems like a more or less good definition of America first, a good test, a question, right? And it seems a little bit contrived, realistically, right? It's a little contrived. But some of you already see where we're going with this, right? Because just the other day, metaphorically speaking, although technically the binders that these fine folks were given were a giant nothing burger, right now, Kash Patel and Pam Bondi are faced with this exact question. And it is not an exaggeration. Okay? Right now, our government, members of our government, are being given this button. And the button says, if you had to choose between exposing the world's largest child sex trafficking ring in known history that directly targeted the United States of America and elicited compromising blackmail material on many of our top government officials, as well as untold numbers of other powerful people in our nation, on behalf of a foreign nation, would you push the button and expose those truths? Because if you do push that button, do you know what's going to happen? Pushing that button will expose what was really happening with Jeffrey Epstein. And what was really happening with Jeffrey Epstein is that he worked for Mossad and for Israel. And we can go into that a little bit in a moment here. We're not going to try to prove the whole point. That's a whole other show. And I have done that show before, several times. But let's think it through. Because if you push the button and actually release the real Epstein files, what does that do to Israel's relationship with America? How could you possibly claim that Israel is our greatest ally if it is exposed in the public square that not only did they target us with espionage straight up to the president of the United States, but it was espionage of the darkest, most disgusting order that involved child sex trafficking, raping and killing of children, American children, on behalf of getting blackmail to serve a foreign nation. That is what the Jeffrey Epstein network was. And it's probably still operating on some degree with a different handler or representative. Okay? And if that were exposed, how would that change the American public sentiment about Israel? I can only imagine that we would stop giving them aid money. And we would probably stop considering them an ally. To me, that's not an ally. To me, that's our greatest enemy. That's our greatest threat. That is a level of subversion and espionage that throughout the entire Cold War, the Soviet Union never even approached achieving. And the Soviet Union was our greatest enemy ever, right? Hitler never even came close to that level of subversion and compromise of our nation, right? And yet today, we are sending our own tax dollars by the billions to this foreign nation. We are passing laws in our country that limit freedom of speech, the First Amendment, on behalf of that foreign country. We are shaping our entire international, global geopolitical policy on behalf of that other country that has all of this blackmail, right? And right now, we are expecting for Pam Bondi and Kash Patel to press that button. And will they actually do it? Right? It's a lot easier to consider the answer to that question when it's Iran or Russia or China, right? It's a whole different question when it's Israel. And we'll come back to our panel in just a second here. But right now, just for a second, I want to speak directly to these two. There's actually a third there, which is a whole other rabbit hole that we're not going to go into tonight. But Kash Patel and Pam Bondi, if the Jeffrey Epstein files directly implicate Israel as the primary operator of this blackmail ring, would you press that button? Because Israel was the prime operator, not the only operator, but the prime operator. And we'll talk about that in a second. We'll explain some reasoning there. But as you get these files and look at them and discover that that is the truth, you're going to be faced with this exact question. Would you press that button knowing that it will have irrevocable implications for the entire future of Israel? By extension, the entire future of the Jewish people. Would you press that button and release those files? That's the question that's on everybody's mind right now. And that has always been intentionally smeared as one of the most deeply anti-Semitic things that you can say. And that is for very good reason, that they target that specific question as one of the greatest pieces of anti-Semitism one could ever utter. So let's be clear. I do not hate Jewish people. I have no problem with Jewish people. I do not judge people based upon their race, their color, their religion, their gender, any of that. I interact with people as individuals and I judge them based upon their individual actions, ideas, decisions. And everyone that's met me can attest to that. And right now, Pam, Cash, I'm looking at you. The whole American people, the whole world is looking at you. And we already know what Jeffrey Epstein was doing. We already know what's in the files. Hopefully there's some extra in the files. But what is available publicly, just by researching the truth through primary sources, publicly available information, even just by the most basic acts of logic, we already know who Jeffrey Epstein worked for. Dan Bongino recently said on the podcast, maybe it was Tim Pool, right? I think it was on Tim Pool. Dan Bongino said that he had this inside source that told him when he was at Fox News, blah, 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 that Epstein was working for a foreign country in the Middle East. I don't know what country, but he was working for a foreign country in the Middle East. Really, Dan? Really? You don't know what country in the Middle East Jeffrey Epstein was working for? Let's pull up our Epstein notes and just do a little thinking. We have a Zionist Jewish billionaire paired with the ex-prime minister of Israel, a Zionist Jewish millionaire, paired with the daughter of one of the most infamous Mossad spies in history, who is also a Zionist Jewish millionaire before he was mysteriously killed, bankrolled by one of the world's richest and most prominent Zionist Jewish billionaires. And by Zionist, I don't just mean saying that they support Israel. I mean that Leslie Wexner has devoted his entire life to giving millions and millions and millions of dollars to organizations specifically designed to promote Israel's interests around the world. Organizations specifically designed to creating propaganda tours for people that visit Israel. Organizations specifically designed to bringing Jewish Zionist billionaires together from around the world to further Israel's interests. I mean, spending millions of his own dollars operating a global child sex trafficking ring on behalf of his buddy Jeffrey Epstein, targeting mostly American officials, as well as a few British, a few around the world, for sure. But as far as I'm aware, they weren't targeting Benjamin Netanyahu. And so to the commenter earlier that said maybe Jeffrey was actually working for the CIA, and actually Israel is the canard, and it's actually backwards. I would not expect to see the trafficking ring targeting the president of the United States and not the prime minister of Israel if that were the case. And let's be real. Do we really think, are we really to believe, are you trying to tell me that a giant group of entirely Jewish Zionist billionaires and millionaires, some of whom have direct linkages to Israel's secret intelligence services, you're telling me that they're going to be working for an Arab or Muslim nation? Some people have tried to float around Saudi Arabia. I mean, certainly less retarded of an idea than working for Iran. But you're trying to tell me that these Jews, these Zionists, in this case, they are actually all Jews as well, although who knows how religious they really are. In this case, We're supposed to believe that these people who devoted everything else in their lives to Israel, like to the point of Leslie Wexner set up foundation on foundation on foundation, put millions of dollars towards Israel. But when he did the child sex trafficking ring, he did that for Saudi Arabia. He just did everything else for Israel. Someone please explain the logic of that logic. What? And so now the other side of that. Certainly, he didn't only work with Israel. The Mossad and the CIA have been joined at the hip since they were both founded back in the 40s. And if you study up on your history of the CIA and you do some research, I mean, these books included, there are lots of books, lots of stuff online. If you do your research, you come to understand that relationship quite well, and it makes a lot of sense. And certainly, elements of CIA and elements of Mossad have worked together for a long time. Even elements of MI6 have occasionally worked together with these other intelligence agencies. They are in a network, right? But you're to tell me that you think that this organization with this guy and this guy and this guy's daughter and this guy, oh, and don't forget the scummy lawyer, you're telling me that that organization was more loyal to the CIA in America than they were to Israel, despite the fact that all of their targets were American people? Apparently, it would seem that way. I mean, come on. So, let's remind ourselves, just because these Jewish Zionist billionaires and millionaires are evil pieces of shit does not mean that I am suggesting that all Jewish people are anything like them, okay? Because I'm not suggesting that. In the exact same way that Jeff Bezos or Larry Ellison are pieces of shit, any rich person has perfectly good potential to become a total piece of shit. Even the ones we want to love, like Elon or Trump, they are perfectly capable and have multiple times in their lives done super shitty things. Okay? So we're not going to dig super, super deep into, although I did just notice in my notes a note about dual loyalty. Let's read. I took these notes long enough ago that I don't remember the specific page, but I presume that it's tied to either Alan Dershowitz or perhaps it's tied to Les Wexner. The Jewish Future Promise. Originally, Jewish Future Pledge is a charitable campaign modeled after the Giving Pledge to encourage American Jews to designate at least 50% of their charitable giving to Jewish or Israel-related causes. From its inception in May 2020 to January 2024, it attracted almost 50,000 signers. Co-creators Michael Levin and Amy Holtz launched the pledge in May of 2020, modeled after the Giving Pledge, to encourage American Jews to designate at least 50% of their charitable giving to Jewish or Israel-related causes. Interesting. The pledge partnered with the Jewish Federation of North America, Jewish National Fund, the Jewish fraternity Alpha Epsilon Pi. If you do research about this kind of stuff, you realize that Jewish people are exceptionally good at making pro-Jewish organizations, pro-Israel organizations, making networks of organizations that are specifically designed for Jews to be included in, not other people, and for them to support each other, and for them all to support Israel. And I'm not saying that that is inherently a bad thing or inherently evil. It's not. It's perfectly okay. It is okay for Italians to band together and to form an Italian homies club where they hang out and just do Italian stuff. And they go, hey, and they talk with their hands, they make pizza, and they do whatever stereotypical thing Italian people do. Totally fine. There is nothing wrong with that. But the moment that that becomes a mafia, the moment they start sex trafficking children, committing war crimes, illegally shuffling funds around to lobby our government in illicit ways, that starts to be a little bit different. That starts to become a problem. And to be clear, I'm not claiming that the Jewish future promise is illegal or doing anything untowards. It's just a example of a pattern that when you actually look into how our world is structured, how the Jewish faith is structured, it's a piece of that puzzle. And it starts to help you to understand the Jewish question. And I don't mean the Jewish question like, are you J-pilled? We'll talk about that in a minute. I mean the Jewish question in terms of Jewish people is Jewish people. Question for you. Do you support Israel? That's the first part. Because not all Jewish people do. And the more you think about the question of should we have ever founded Israel? Should Israel exist? And I'm not saying that you should kill all the Jews there. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying the more you think about the question of is it on balance better for global Judaism or worse for global Judaism to have the state of Israel exist? That is not as simple of a question as you might think. Okay? Because let's dissect this a little bit. And it should be obvious by now why this needs to be a long form conversation, because this is extremely complicated. If the state of Israel does not exist, if it was never founded, if Jewish people never created a homeland and this colonization project and made that state, then Jewish people would currently be living all around the world as they have for millennia, and that might be the wrong word, for thousands of years, integrated into other societies, probably still partially sectioned off into their own communities because Jewish people like to, associate with other Jewish people, just like every other group likes to associate with their own group. Totally fine. And they would be integrated into other countries. And in those countries, there would be no question of, are you more loyal to the Jewish country over there or to us? I mean, I don't know. I'm not, maybe over history, actually, that has come up. I would imagine that it has over history where people are like, you Jews are loyal only to each other, and then they kick them out, and then that becomes a whole strife. And that is probably a bunch of evil shit on both sides of that across history a lot of times. And it probably on different occasions was more shitty on one side than the other, and they probably have taken turns over history in the various instances of this happening. But if Israel did not exist today, then then Epstein would have never existed. We wouldn't even be having this conversation. But because Israel does exist, then unfortunately, we need to ask this question. Because if you don't consider this question, you're not a mature adult. You're an idiot if you don't consider this question. And trying to pretend that considering this question is anti-Semitic is deeply anti-intelligence. Like, that's the dumbest thing you could ever suggest. That would be like saying that you can only be pro-science if you don't talk about how gravity works, or like you don't talk about how the solar system and outer space works. Like, as if you walled off a whole section of the logical thought processes that require you to run this the conceptual process of science. You can't do that. And when we're talking about running the conceptual process of our nation, America, we are faced with the question. There's a bunch of files on a blackmail operation that has compromised our government at the highest levels of power, and they are all Jewish people with ties to Israel, and it is quite clear that it was Israel that was doing it. And so either we ignore it, cover it up, never address it, and forget it ever happened and allow it to continue indefinitely, or we have to ask this question. And everyone needs to ask this question. And let's be exceptionally clear. I am not suggesting that we try to answer this question for other people. Okay? Even though I personally, we should probably direct this directly at our boy, because let's be real. Where's our boy? Where's our boy? Yo, Ben, where you at? Where are you at? Cool, you're up there. Let's get back with Ben. And let's sit down and talk to Ben directly on this one. Ben, good to see you, bro. Missed your face. Ben. Here's what I'm trying to say. It is not our job to answer this question for Ben. It's Ben's job to answer this question for himself. The only instance in which it would ever be appropriate for someone to answer this question for someone else is when there is explicit evidence of a crime and you let a court answer the question for them under due process of the law. If there has been subversion or treason or espionage or something like that. Okay. But it is not in any way acceptable for you, because you don't like Jewish people or you suspect Jewish people or you whatever it is not acceptable for you to try to pretend like you know someone's allegiance is better than themselves. Okay. That is how you lead to some really horrific shit really fast. Okay. And even people that have been overtly Zionist in the past, when they actually think this question through, they might realize that realistically, like, yes, you might love and support Israel and support their right to exist and support the people of that Jewish homeland. But when it comes down to it, you might value truth and reconciliation in this matter more than Israel. Two things can be true at once. But unfortunately, this button is a binary state. You cannot have half disclosure. That's not how it works. If you were to try to expose the Jeffrey Epstein network and exclude all of the ties to Israel, you would literally just be talking about the girls he groomed to help him groom more girls. Because you have to go down so deep into his organization to the literal victims that have become predators before you start to find people that were not Jewish and did not have ties to Israel. That's how deeply tied into Israel his organization was. And yes, I know there are exceptions to that rule. Like Jean-Luc Brunel, to my knowledge, he was not a Jewish person. But you get what I'm saying. If you tried to cut out all the instances of Jewish and Zionist and Israeli influence in that operation, you would have no operation to expose. Okay? And so that brings us to the binders and to our friends in the new alt media that just so happened to pretty much all be Zionists and or Jewish. Not all of them. Not all of them. And I'm not saying that because they are Zionist or Jewish that they're not going to do the right thing. I'm not saying that I don't believe them or believe in them, okay? I do disagree with their stance on Israel, but I still see their humanity and I respect their journalism. I respect them as people, right? I have nothing but love for people until I see them with my own eyes do something evil, okay? And when it comes to someone like Jack Posobiec, I have not seen him do anything I particularly didn't like. I'm not super familiar with his journalism. And when I search his page for Israel, I actually think that despite, I think the consensus is that he is pro-Israel. And I think he took his honeymoon in Israel. But when you search his page, he's actually reporting on what looks like, at least a bit of both sides of the issue. It seems to be more balanced than a lot of people. Credit to you, Jack. That's sick. Okay. And I'm not trying to target, I'm not trying to out anyone. These are just the people that got the binders, right? And DC Drano is a good example. Huge account, very popular dude. I'm not super familiar with his reporting, but I do believe that he is Jewish and he is very pro-Israel. And he visited Israel and made videos about it. When you search his page for his perspectives on Israel, he is very pro-Israel. The same is certainly true of Chaya, who runs Libs of TikTok, who actually reposts Israeli propaganda frequently. Cernovich, who I believe is Jewish, I don't know. It's not super relevant. It's just it's just the bigger picture of this is a question that we all need to answer for ourselves. And these people need to answer it for themselves is, would you press that button and release the real unredacted full Epstein files if they implicated the shit out of Israel? Okay. And Cernovich appears to be friends with Dershowitz. I'm not sure what this means, and it's important not to jump to conclusions when you just see a photo of two people side by side, okay? So I'm not saying pile onto Cernovich for being best friends with Dershowitz, because I don't know what that relationship is, and someone can dig into it and expose if there is something to expose there. Don't know, okay? But Dershowitz is a piece of shit. I feel very comfortable saying that Dershowitz is a piece of shit, because allegedly, if you read the Epstein files that we already have, from all the testimony of all the victims that we already have, and you just like look at the dude trying to deny it, he's done some pretty awful shit to kids. Not to mention he was Jeffrey Epstein's fucking lawyer. Okay. Liz Wheeler, extremely pro-Israel. You just need to search her page for Israel. This chick, Emily Austin, she's got her early life right in her Twitter bio. She put it there herself. She represents this company called Wasserman, which if you don't know the history of who Lou Wasserman is, I don't know if the company is named after the family Wasserman, but that's like a pretty intense name to choose for that company. And that's just a funny joke. I'm not trying to say that that's necessarily a connection or anything. But like her photo right here is literally at the Republican Jewish Convention. Okay. So I can't help but notice that the composition of the influencers that received the binders is pretty interesting. And there are others, like House and Habit got one. Savannah Hernandez was there. There's a few other people that were there. ALX was there. Okay. And there was a lot of sort of misinformation and misconstruing of what happened. And so actually, now that I've done what will probably be seen as attacking these guys, let me defend them for a second. Okay. Because I'm not trying to attack them by what I'm saying there. What I'm trying to do is point out that up till today, their allegiance has been to Israel. But now that they are deciding to step into the arena of this story, and to be fair, maybe they don't want to be in the story. Like they didn't ask to be, and they didn't know they were going to be handed these binders. Like realistically, they got thrown under the bus here. And maybe they don't want to be a part of exposing this story. But if you do want to be a part of exposing this story, all you guys, you're going to need to ask yourself this question. Would you press that button? Because behind that button is Israel. Okay? But let's clear up some stuff. To the best of my understanding at this point, based upon the reporting that happened, based upon the things that have come out, they did not know that they were going to be getting binders of files or anything like that. This meeting that they had was scheduled months in advance. And it was a meeting that was designed to welcome the new media into the fold, right? And so they showed up, and Pam Bondi, the timing is such that the Epstein file release is happening, and I don't know who thought of it, and I don't think we understand what the real purpose was, because there's a lot we don't know. But for whatever reason, they were given these binders that were largely nothing burgers. But in the binders that were nothing burgers, Pam Bondi included a letter in the binder, and it was the letter that is now publicly. Oh, that's a video of Tucker. Let me bring it up. This is the letter now, infamous, from Pam Bondi to Kash Patel, saying that y'all have been withholding shit from me. The FDNY is hiding thousands of documents. They only gave me 200 pages. WTF, get your shit together and have your documents on my desk by what is now this morning. Already passed. Okay. That letter, to the best of my understanding, and I'm pretty sure I'm right on this, was inside the binders when she gave it to these influencers. And what that means is that Pam Bondi was not presenting this binder to them. And this is also what they have said in their own testimony. She was not presenting it as though this exposes it all. This is the whole thing. This is everything. That's not what it was being said. What was being said was, we had this plan and we were going to give you these binders, and we're getting fucked by the FBI right now, and I'm super pissed. But like, let's get the ball rolling. Here's what we know. Here's what we do have, and here's our commitment to get more. Right? If you take it at face value, that seems to be what actually happened in that room. And then they were asked not to do any media or to show any photos or to do anything until 3 p.m. that day. Then they walked out of the Oval Office, out of the White House, and Keir Starmer's media was there to take photos of Keir Starmer, apparently. And when you watch the live video of the actual newscasts of that moment when they walked out and got caught on camera, you can hear the news reporters clearly speaking and saying, like, who are those people? What are they holding? What's going on? Who are they? And they're like zooming the camera in, trying to get a look. And that is when DC Drano first, I believe, and then a couple of the others kind of like held up the binders and walked over a little bit and kind of held them up and showed them, which was a pretty bad move. In retrospect, I think Drano can probably admit that was like probably not the move, bro. It was probably a better move to stick to what Pam Bondi had asked you to do pretty explicitly and to just shuffle the fuck out of there real quick and not show those binders. And that would have avoided a huge amount of this messed up media storm that has confused everything. But, whatever. A lot of them then did little media tours and did their photo shoots and did all this shit. So it's not really clear that there was any intent ever to not kind of grift on this. It felt a little grifty. Let's be real. Felt super grifty. And different ones of them did it differently. Some of them were very, some of them no one even knew how to copy because they listened to Pam Bondi and they shuffled right the hell off and they didn't show themselves off. They didn't show their binders. They just got the hell out of there. Respect to that. Great move. But we're here where we are now. What's done is done. And the question is, where are we now? What's going on? We are faced now with a situation that's never happened in American history, probably in world history, where there is a massive international organized crime and covert intelligence operation that's being exposed in real time inside of our cell phones. And we are all now inherently a part of the process of that declassification. We are now a part of the investigation. And that sounds like so great at first. At first glance, it's like, sick, the new media is here. Look at this. Regular Americans are now involved, and we're going to help solve the case. But let's be real. None of us are equipped to understand even the most basic elements of a complex covert intelligence operation like this. None of us are even beginning to be equipped to understand the nature of organized crime at the scale that we are currently talking about. This is incredibly complex. And just to fuck it all up even more, it's a blackmail scheme. And what does a blackmail scheme imply? A blackmail scheme implies that you don't know who to trust and you don't know who's telling the truth, right? Because anyone could be blackmailed. Pam Bondi could be blackmailed, or she could just be a Zionist and be so Zionist that she's willing to cover this stuff up. Because although that sounds insane, and I'm not saying that I believe she's doing that, I hope to all things holy that she is not doing that. But we have a lot of past presidents and administrators, CIA officials, DOJ officials like Bill Barr, who have done exactly that, who have covered this crime up on behalf of who? Realistically, the answer to that is both the clients and the organizers, the perpetrating country. Because let's be real, the clients, let's take a moment here. The clients of this operation, they were not just politicians. They were Wall Street executives. They were bankers. They were celebrities. They were all of the most powerful people in our country. And to be clear, that hierarchy is definitely celebrities are the peasants, CEOs and executives are here, and the bankers are on top. And all of them were utilizing these services. Well, let's be clear. Not all of them, but a lot of them, a whole lot of them. And some of that we know explicitly through witness testimony, through things that have leaked, through investigations, through victim testimony. And some of it we are inferring based upon the network of evidence, right? But the clients are extremely powerful. And when you start to learn more and more and more about sex trafficking and about how these wealthy people work, how these organized crime rings work, you start to realize that at the top, just like how Diddy was able to be doing this thing out in the open in the middle of Hollywood for decades, it's just how the culture is, which is super fucked up. But I think that regular Americans like us cannot really conceive of how prevalent some amounts of this behavior are in the circles that these CEOs, executives, celebrities move in. So, yeah, the cover up is on behalf of the clients, the Johns. But it is also on behalf of the perpetrators, the country that was bankrolling, backing, and running cover for this whole thing. And to be clear, the running of the cover was also probably, almost certainly, definitely certainly, elements within our own CIA, elements within our own FBI. That is probably why the Federal District of New York office of the FBI is now apparently hiding thousands of documents and pieces of evidence, and probably worse, right? It's not just Israel. It is also splinter elements within our own agencies and organizations. And we may never know how that came to be, because when you blackmail someone, the next thing you usually do is you go to them and you say, hey, it'd be really great if you could help me out with this thing. And it's like, not a big deal, but like, we wouldn't want to break our friendship, right? It would be a real bummer if we like had to cut ties and not have friendship and I really love it if you would like do this thing for me, right? And often you'll then commit a little crime, do a little thing, inside trade, share some information, grab a document, whatever it is. That's the fucking point of blackmail. That's how it works. And usually once they're on the leash, then you leash them in a little more and you get them working a little more and they help you a little more because they don't want to be exposed. And simultaneously to while you're having them do things for you, you're also rewarding them with anything their heart could ever desire, anything that their sick fucking mind could ever want. Hey, you're in the club now. Fly to the island, go to the Diddy parties, no problem. We've got you. We got this whole network of sin for you to engage in, right? And so you reward the good behavior and you threaten to punish any bad behavior. And slowly over time, a person that was at first blackmailed maybe by a single photo, like the former director of the FBI, Hoover, he was the founder of the FBI and he ran the FBI for the first 48 years, I believe, of its existence. And J. Edgar Hoover was blackmailed by the Jewish mob and the Italian mafia for that entire time, basically, because he liked to dress up like a woman and have sex with boys. And they got a photo of it. And then once they got a photo of it, then they owned him. And once they owned him, they got him to do more things for them. And he realized once they owned him, he was like, yeah, fuck it. So why don't we throw a bunch of cross-dressing parties? Because it's already out there. Like, they've already got me. So why not keep doing it? And pretty quickly, the line blurs and they become a partnership that can't be broken. That's how blackmail works. You see what I'm saying? When you look at how our corrupt deep state governments are working right now. And so, when we're talking about exposing a blackmail operation in the public square, where literally just regular people are a part of that disclosure and a part of that investigation, we are woefully underprepared for the complexities of this issue. Because how do you know if Pam Bondi is on the up and up or not? How do you know if Kash Patel's girlfriend is secretly a Mossad asset or not? Because you can make the tie to PragerU and PragerU to the Mossad and other Israeli intelligence services, but that doesn't necessarily mean that she is that. Like that, you can't infer that. You can tinfoil and you can suspect, but it's pretty dangerous to do because you're going to get that shit wrong all the time. And this is not the kind of thing that we can get wrong. Okay? The implications of getting this wrong are insane. And I saw a comment, why is Jimmy Dore on there? If you'll notice, there's a lot of people on there. I mean, the top row is like people that are mostly Zionist, super Zionist media. I don't actually know Megyn Kelly's stance, but like, if there was ever a Mossad asset in the public square, Gad Saad has openly admitted to it. Okay. So this top row is a specific, type of people. Lex Fridman, a lot of people have some speculations about who Lex is and where Lex came from. But for now, that's all it is speculation. And how would we know? Right. So you have to think very critically. Laura Loomer is a great example. She's Jewish. She's extremely Zionist, but she is unafraid to call out certain things in certain ways. That you really have to take your time and pay attention. And I gained a lot of respect for Laura's reporting 1 week ago. And then when this happened, Laura's reporting was just starting fucking fights and fires left and right with all of these people that had the binders. And it really felt like she jumped the gun on starting flame wars and fights in the public square before having the whole story of what had really happened. And if you look at her attacks on House and Habit, it's like, holy shit, bro, chill out. And so what I mean by that is that it's very complicated. You have to think carefully about each of these individual people. I feel pretty confident that I suspect, allegedly, not trying to litigate Ben, I've got some theories about Ben Shapiro's true allegiances. Charlie Kirk, though, I don't know. Charlie's an amazing man. Like, Charlie's done some amazing things. Charlie's perspective on how to change America and bring conservatism back into American politics in a new way by targeting the youth in our schools, that is a degree of understanding of the nature of socialism and the nature of the problem and the nature of culture. And that's a brilliant mind. Charlie has done some amazing things. And like, to be clear, Ben's pretty fucking smart too. But Charlie is an overt, super hardcore Zionist. And who knows if that's just because he knows that that's how the money flows and that he won't be throwing AmFest next year if he speaks out about Israel. Or is there something deeper going on there? We have no way to know. And trying to pretend like you do know is far worse than admitting that you don't. So this top row, Jewish people and Zionists, which have to answer this question in a very specific way. Right? This bottom row is an example of people that are not quite so overtly pro-Israel. Tucker is taking more and more of his own path on this. Tim is sort of in the middle, and he's given both sides, and he's kind of just America only, and I don't know. He gives all kinds of takes, whatever. Dave Smith has taken a very strong stance. Dave Smith is a Jew that has already answered this question for himself. Jimmy Dore, not Jewish, already answered this question for himself very clearly in the public square. Dan Bongino, he's on the side here. He's got to answer this question for himself. And if you've seen the clip where he gets asked in the interview, what's a cause that's near and dear to your heart? And the first thing that comes to his mind is protecting and empowering Israel. Bro, you're an American. You're in America. You're the deputy director of the FBI, and that's the best thing that you can come up with that's near and dear to your heart. Not your wife, not your kids, not your Secret Service protection in service of the President of the United States of America. Israel? Dan, you're killing me, bro. You're a smart dude. I like you. So, that is the question that is deeply complex to ask. And it's even more complex for some people to answer. And the fallout of asking that question is very dangerous. There's a good reason why Jewish people stigmatize that question. Because that question very quickly stigmatizes Jewish people. That question very quickly leads to whole groups, whole nations banding together against Jewish people and doing horrible things to them and dehumanizing them and making it and pretending like they can answer that question for all Jewish people. Okay? It's one thing to say, hey, we have a sex trafficking blackmail ring filled with Jewish Zionists, and all of those Jewish Zionists are evil and deserve to face the law. It's an entirely different thing to say that all Jewish people can't be trusted and they should all be kicked out. That's my opinion. And the reason for that is this. All of the most anti-Israel people, I am pleading with you, here is the reasoning. Okay? Even if you are the type of person that actually thinks, no, fuck the Jews, send them out of the country, they don't deserve to be here. If that's you, here's the logic. Read some history. If you think that Israel is like this, the one threat, the absolute literal Satan on this earth, if you like in all of the anti-Israel conspiracy theories, how do you think we got here? We got here by Jewish people fighting over history with non-Jewish people, and the fault was often on both sides variably. Certainly, Jewish people did things to get kicked out of countries in the past. Out of a lot of countries. But certainly the retaliation, the responses gave those Jewish people a very true narrative that they had been persecuted by other nations. And you can fight chicken and egg, chicken and egg, chicken and egg. Who the fuck cares? Okay? If you start doing the exact thing that gave rise to the current state of the Israeli propaganda machine and to the Jewish narrative of anti-Semitism and of pogroms and of Holocausts, if you give rise to the next iteration of the actual reality of those things, not only are you evil, but you're also dumb, because you have just condemned the world to an entire another cycle of this shit. Do you see what I'm saying? We are trapped in a very complex, multi-generational historical conflict between religions that have always butted heads. And it is an out-of-date conflict. This conflict comes from a time when we were riding horses and swinging swords and fighting wars for territory for kings and queens, and most people couldn't even read, okay? We are in a whole new world. We literally all are connected by our phones. We can get in cars and drive across the country. You can get in an airplane and fly to the other side of the world. You're living door to door with people from completely different parts of the world with different cultures. We used to have a world where being exclusive of others and racist and all this, the real racism, not like the funny racism, like all of those things, they weren't consequential in the same way they are today. Whereas today, if you have a supremacist ideology, like if you are a super Zionist, if you're an Israeli, and a lot of Israelis think this way, and you are God's chosen people, and you think that Jewish people are God's chosen people, and all the Goyim are lesser than you are never going to have peace in this world. That should be obvious. Any Jewish person that thinks that they are God's chosen people and they think that that means that they are of a different class than other people, and they think that they can treat other people as lesser because they're not Jewish. Do we need to say what that is? Because you can go on Twitter right now and just scroll your feed and you can see videos of Israeli people openly saying things about that. Just openly bragging about that ideology on the internet. And it is not all Israeli people, but there are plenty. And there's plenty of people in Israel that indoctrinate that into their youth. This same is true of other nationalities and religions. That same concept, in many ways, is the heart of the jihad mindset latent in Muslims that Jewish people love to point to scapegoat Muslims. This idea of jihad of all the infidels. There's also an element of that is not as much written into the Bible, but certain people find that in Christianity over time, in history. Although these days, I don't ever see it these days. Well, maybe a tiny bit on Twitter. So what I'm saying is that supremacy within all of these religions, supremacy of ideals and peoples and beliefs, that is incompatible with the world we live in today. If you hold supremacist beliefs, regardless of which group you're in, you're inherently going to be fighting with every other group till the end of fucking time. It's a dumb strategy. And I would implore all Jewish people that think that Jews are God's chosen people to rethink your strategy, because you are committing yourself to an eternity of violence and conflict with the rest of the world. The same goes for every other group in this world that might be or become supremacist. We've got to get along. We need a little fucking tolerance. We need to heal. And right now, we're confronted by this giant fucking problem that presents everyone with this complicated, terrible question that you don't get to not choose. Right now, every one of our politicians, every one of our influencers, and particularly every Jewish person, for better or for worse, have to make a choice. If you had the opportunity to release the Jeffrey Epstein files and they implicated Israel and all of the fallout of that decision, would you do it? And as we watch the various people in the administration make this decision personally, publicly, privately, as we look at all of the evidence of what is really going on, layers and layers of intelligence operations and organized crime operations unraveling, as we watch, because we're talking about, let's be clear, we're talking about the largest organized crime network in the world. Okay, the human traffickers are at the top of the organized crime pyramid because they're the ones that are doing the blackmail on everyone else, and you better fucking believe they're blackmailing the other criminals. That's business 101. Okay, and so when we're trying to take down Epstein, we're not just trying to take down Epstein's operation. We are a threat to the entire network of organized crime. And they are going to level everything they've got at stopping this. Okay. And so maybe Pam Bondi is compromised. Maybe the evidence about her time in Florida, and the previous Jeffrey Epstein cases, maybe that evidence is legit, and maybe her Zionism and her positioning and Matt Gaetz getting forced out and her getting put in, maybe it is a conspiracy theory. Maybe she's here to cover it up. Or maybe she's genuine and she actually wants to save America, and she's just up against the most powerful transnational criminal organization that the world has ever known. And they are fighting for their lives right now. Anyone that was informed about the state of the Israel question and the state of the Jeffrey Epstein network, you should have known that this was not going to be easy. As far as I can, if I had to speculate, I think they would rather bomb America. I think they would rather commit egregious acts of terror, kill hundreds of thousands of people, than allow the true story to come out right now. Because if this story comes out, not only is Israel's entire future existence threatened, but so is the future of all of these organized crime networks, not just the traffickers, but also the smugglers, also the cartels, also the drug runners, the drug producers. Okay? Not to mention all the people that are blackmailed, that like to do horrible things to children and want their life to keep on going how it's going and not go to prison and worse. And so, to circle it all back and to kind of put a bow on it, this shit's super complicated. I do this for a living. I spend all day researching this shit. I actually get to meet some of these people and get to know them a little bit. And I have no fucking clue what's going on. Admittedly, I am not the brightest fucking crayon in this box. I can't even get that phrase right. But even if you are the brightest fucking crayon in the box, even if you're Ben Shapiro and you have 180 IQ and you're a fucking super genius that understands everything and is going to tell everyone all about it, you still probably don't fucking understand what's going on here because you're not in that room. You're not reading that document. You didn't see that interaction. It is super complicated. Okay? And so I'm not saying you can't solve it, and I'm not saying we shouldn't try. What I'm saying is that we should be very vigilant and very careful, because when you're in a fight for your life with an enemy of enormous resources, skill, and experience, you don't just charge in like a fucking retard, okay? You got to have some tact. You got to have some strategy. You got to think carefully. We only get to do this once, okay? And if we fuck it up, those consequences will reverberate throughout history for all of time. And it would probably be great if it wasn't a bunch of numbskulls like me and like all the rest of us in this influencer decentralized media space. It'd be great if we could have some like actual professional journalists actually doing the job right. But this criminal cabal has paid off, bought off, blackmailed, fired, and ostracized all the real journalists for the last 50 years. And now there's not a whole lot of them left. So, this is the team that we've got. The influencers that we got, the journalists that we've got, the people that we got. All y'all in the out there, all you diggers, you anons, This is who we are. This is our team. And we have to do our best with the skills that we've got, with the preparation that we've got, with the information that we've got. And I would be dumbfounded if anyone would genuinely approach this and try to tell me that the right response right now is emotional, rash, rushed, angry screaming. And that's most of what Twitter was, all of yesterday and all of today. Okay? Yes, it is fun, especially when Zelensky is a total piece of shit in the White House and he gets absolutely dunked on by Trump and Vance. Holy shit. It's hilarious and it's fun to be a little unhinged. And I'm not trying to say we don't be unhinged. I'm just saying that some things matter way more than other things. And the Epstein story is the thing that matters more than anything else. Because even if you aren't that concerned specifically about Epstein, but you're concerned about other things, the way that Epstein ties into all these other things, Epstein is the perfect illustration of Israel. And Epstein is the exact thing that is going to crack the Israel question wide open and finally free our nation from this yoke of this foreign, blackmailing, subversive, oppressive, whatever the fuck this relationship is. Okay? It's not going to be the USS Liberty. It's not going to be 9/11. It's not even going to be the JFK assassination. It's going to be Epstein. And for good damn reason. Jeffrey Epstein's network was an act of war against our country. Had any of our enemies done this, if this had been Iran, if these books had been about an Iranian network, there would not be a single fucking soul in Iran today. America would have obliterated it years ago. Okay? And we all know that. If it had been China, North Korea, even if it had been Guatemala, we would have fucking leveled them. But it's Israel. And Israel has been working this relationship for a very long time in very complex ways. And it is not a simple thing to disentangle. Strategy, composure, poise, a lot of grace and care. Because remember, to wrap it all up, to remind ourselves, these are all real people with real lives, with families, right? Every one of these people, it's easy to see them as a talking head online, as just some fucking piece of shit that I hate you, you're evil, all you do is spit propaganda, you're a horrible. They're still a person though, and they still have a family, they still have kids, they still have hopes and dreams. And the children of our country were the victims of this crime. It's really easy to hold up a binder and be like, hooray, I get publicity. I'm going to expose the Epstein client list. You're holding a binder that's about children being raped and sometimes killed. Okay. And the Epstein network was just the tiniest drop in the bucket that is the human trafficking, child sex trafficking, child slavery networks in our country today. Ryan Mata and JJ Carroll spent the last 3 years working to make 3 different documentaries exposing the child and human trafficking scandal at the border. And what we know of is there are hundreds of thousands of missing children that have been trafficked into slavery, into labor, and into sex work in our country right now. This is about the kids. This is about children. This is about saving and protecting our children. Okay? And anyone that's going to side with some foreign nation over American children, you're going to have to live with that decision. And that is the decision that's being made here. That's what the button is. The button is expose the trafficking and end it. Go after it with everything we've got and save the children from a life of sexual and abusive slavery. Or it's put a foreign nation first and cover up their crimes. And by extension, cover up the crimes of all of these trafficking networks and pretend that it's not happening? That's the question that all of us have to answer. And that's the question that I am posing directly to you, Ben Shapiro, and to you, Charlie, and to Jordan, and to Megan, and to Lex, and to Gad, and to Laura, all of you guys. If the Epstein documents directly implicate Israel, are you still in support of a full release of their documents, of their contents? And if not, you should fucking move to Israel. Right? So, I think that's more than enough for tonight. I think I've said more than enough things that can be clipped and weaponized and turned into. Okay? So let's reiterate. All those people clipping my words and taking them out of context, they're fucking stupid, because they are exposing the very propaganda that protects pedophiles like this. We just had a relatively nuanced, complex discussion that I did my best as just a mortal human to elucidate some of these ideas. I could have done better. Sue me. The thing about this job is that you have to make a choice every day about whether or not you're going to do things. You have to make a choice about whether or not you're going to speak up. You have to make a choice about whether or not you're going to say what needs to be said. And you don't get to choose what needs to be said. You don't get to choose what goes on. You don't get to choose what issue comes up. When you start looking into what's really happening, you don't get to choose what is really happening. I didn't start this to find out about child sex trafficking rings. I want nothing to fucking do with that. I started this to learn about stock markets and about Bitcoin and about GameStop and shit. But in trying to figure out what's really going on, this is where we've wound up. This is what's really going on. Okay? And so I have a choice to make. Do I speak up about what I see going on? Or do I stay silent? And when you make that choice, you have to realize that you might not do it perfectly. You might not say it right. You might misstep. You might fuck up. You might get something wrong. There's a million reasons to not speak up, right? There's a million reasons to not press record, to not put something online, to just sit this one out. Sitting this one out is choosing not to press that button and choosing for that fate to befall America, choosing for this to continue happening to children. So this was me doing my best to address this central question at the heart of what is about to be an extremely messy public investigation of some sort, either investigation or cover up. And if we don't keep the complexity of this question in mind, this loyalty, this blackmail, this duality of who are you serving in mind, we will not be able to understand not only what's happening in front of us, but also what is happening behind the scenes. So that's all we got for tonight. I love you all. I appreciate you all tuning in. I love everyone. I love this whole country, except for Ben Shapiro. I'm kidding, Ben. I'm kidding, Ben. I kind of can tolerate you too. But that's our night tonight. Would love it if you'd share this, press like, leave a comment. A lot of cool things are about to be coming up in the next week or two for me. I'll let you know when we get there. Hopefully the optimistic version of what's to come comes. Hopefully Pam and Cash are doing everything within their power to right these wrongs, to save these kids, to expose this evil. And for now, I'm operating on optimism, and I'm remaining vigilant. I would invite you all to take a similar stance, because the moment we're all assuming the worst, we are giving permission for that to become reality. So let's hold them all to a high standard. Let's hold ourselves to a high standard. And let's save the kids. Like, let's not let our fucking country continue to be the number one purveyor and consumer of child sex trafficking in the world. And with that, have a great Friday night, friends.
American conspiracy theories are dangerous.
Information is the oxygen of a democracy.
With Republicans, with progressives, with libertarians, because this is not about right and left, this is about right and wrong.
It's so sick that we can't talk about it.
It actually lifted up, and it could actually turn.
Legend has it that Christian Rosenkreuz drew his secret knowledge from the wisdom of the ancient Egyptians.
They estimated 100 yards from the left wing was this 100-foot disc.
You begin to get into this very scary scenario that has to do with the human condition, of the proclivity to accumulate vast amounts of power around a handful of people. And right now, these misanthropic sociopaths are running the planet into the ground. Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds.
There's so much evidence out there that even if less than 1% is true, that would be enough to collapse the current paradigm and change the whole planet. Our security is at stake.